Hey guys, Pedro's Movie Cavern back with a new video. This time I'm going to be looking at some more movies, obviously, because it's a movie cavern. And I was thinking, I do a lot of stuff about 80s movies. I just cover a lot, excuse me, a lot of 80s movies, 80s cinema. But I never ever seem to cover like 70s stuff or the older decades, like 60s. So I was going through my DVDs, thinking of like just going through it for inspiration for making a video. And I thought, I've got a fair few 70s movies that are, I guess, underrated or just kind of forgotten about. So as I was going through the DVDs, because I haven't got a lot of 70s movies on Blu-ray. I've got most of them on DVD, or pretty much all of them on DVD, apart from the obvious ones like Jaws and stuff like that. But I found a couple that I think just kind of no one really talks about. When you think of certain movies from certain decades, you think of the 90s, you think of things like Pulp Fiction and Clerks, and like the big action stuff like Face Off and those type of movies. And then with the 80s, you've always got like the big ones like The Thing, E.T., the Star Wars sequels, and like Die Hard, Predator, Rambo, Commando. These big studio films. And yeah, there are a lot of smaller films from those decades that I do talk about. But I never really talk about anything from the 70s because before like Jaws, there wasn't really a huge studio blockbuster picture. Jaws essentially created the blockbuster movie, and then followed that you had things like Star Wars and Close Encounters and what else was there, like Alien in 1979. But prior to that, there wasn't really a huge blockbuster film. So there was a lot of smaller films and a lot cheaper films that were made in the early 70s. This is coming off the back of the studio system of the 1930s, 40s and 50s and somewhat into the 60s as well, towards the end of the studio system in the 1960s. So the 60s saw like the continuation of the romantic comedies that had the studio players like Rock Hudson and Cary Grant and Doris Day, these type of big name Hollywood stars of the golden era of cinema. But it wasn't until like 1969 when I think Raging Bull came out. I think it was 1969. Easy Rider came out and sort of changed the landscape of how films are made in the 1970s. Obviously, like the late 60s, you had a bit of a change as well. So you had things like the Wild Bunch and 2001: A Space Odyssey and what else, like the Planet of the Apes, I think it was 1969 or 1968. You also had like Star Trek TV show, which was a big change for normal TV shows up until like Star Trek. When you really think of those TV shows, you had things like Lost in Space, but the majority of TV shows in America and were shown in the UK were essentially westerns and cop shows. But when you get to the early 70s, after like The Godfather had like become a huge success, and Godfather Part 2 and The Exorcist were like these big studio films, but they weren't classed as blockbusters. They all had sort of controversy surrounding them, especially The Godfather, and especially something like The Exorcist, which was banned for many, many years in the UK, and like films like A Clockwork Orange, again, which was banned in the UK for years because of the controversy surrounding acts that happened in real life. Stanley Kubrick decided to pull the film from theatres to prevent any sort of copycat type of attacks and murders and stuff. But during that period, between like 1970 and 1975, you had a lot of smaller movies. Some were made by big name directors. One of them is in this little pile here, and it's the first one I'm going to really grab. And these are all in plastic sleeves because obviously, if you've seen the previous videos, you know that I had to move a massive DVD collection from one area of the city to another area, and the easiest way to make them, to make the journey, was to put these in plastic sleeves and get rid of the boxes. But the first one I'm going to talk about is this. It's The Killer Elite from 1974. Is it 1974? I had it up just a minute ago. I think it's 1974. No, sorry, 1975. This is The Killer Elite. It stars James Caan and Robert Duvall. This is a film directed by Sam Peckinpah. Now, obviously, if you know anything about movie history, you know who Sam Peckinpah is. Sam Peckinpah directed The Wild Bunch. He also directed, what was the name of that film? I want to say The Ballad of Cable Hogue. Was it that? But also stuff like Straw Dogs and Convoy and stuff like these are known films. But for some reason, no one really ever talks about The Killer Elite, which is a action movie thriller about a government agency of assassins, and it's all double crossings and revenge and martial arts and stuff. It's somewhat of a drop in quality for Sam Peckinpah, but it's still an enjoyable action film nonetheless. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. The direction's pretty good. James Caan's fantastic in it. Robert Duvall's fantastic in it. Both of them play assassins for this sort of government agency, and if James Caan's character gets sort of double-crossed by Robert Duvall, because James Caan's like the best in the business at doing what he does, which is killing people. And he gets shot and left for dead. Basically, they manage to bring him back, but when he comes back, he's determined to get better as fast as he can, and basically it's a sort of revenge-y type of movie. But there's some really good scenes in this. There's some cheesy action scenes in this, considering it's Sam Peckinpah, and Peckinpah did the Wild Bunch. But yeah, so there's like martial arts stuff in this. Before martial arts movies were a big thing in the States. I guess, sort of. I think it was because of Enter the Dragon being a big hit in America, that American studios were like, let's capitalize on the Bruce Lee thing by introducing martial arts into the movies. And yeah, so James Caan does a little bit of karate and other sort of stick-based martial arts. But no, it's pretty good. I think it's really underrated as well. So that's one of the films that I was, while I was flicking through, I was like, The Killer Elite, that's a pretty good film. And it's kind of like never really talked about when you talk about people like Sam Peckinpah. And yeah, so that's why I decided to choose this. It is produced by... Who produced it? Martin Baum and Arthur Lewis, and it was written by Sterling Siliphant and Mark Norman, based on a novel by Robert Rostand. So yeah, The Killer Elite. I think this has had a Kino Lorber 4K or maybe just a Blu-ray release. I'm not 100% sure. This is just the old MGM DVD. But yeah, I really like Killer Elite, and I think more people should probably check that one out. The next one is, again, it's sort of film that no one really talks about, even though it's a really good film, and it's a really good sort of cult movie, being two senses of the words, because it's about a cult and also it's quite culty. So like, it has an audience, but it doesn't have that big an audience. But it's a film that stars Warren Oates, who is always incredible, Peter Fonda, who was fantastic during his heyday, and it's called Race with the Devil. And again, this is a sort of action horror film that you rarely saw in the 1970s. It was either straight horror or straight action, and not the blend of the two. And this one's pretty cool. This is about a motorcycle racer, a motocross racer, and his friend and their wives. on a sort of vacation in an RV, and they pull up to a riverbed to camp for the night. And as they're just chilling out, relaxing across the river, they witness a satanic cult sacrificing a woman. And for literally the majority of the film, they are chased by this satanic cult who want to kill them. And it's pretty cool. It's, very good. There's been sort of films like this since, that sort of like copy this sort of plot. Whereas like it's a group of people being chased by another group of people for witnessing something. Like the film Run with Patrick Dempsey from 1991. That is another film that kind of follows this sort of plot, even though it's not a satanic one. Witness with Harrison Ford. Again, that is about a witness being chased and followed by a group of people who want to remove that person. So in the case of Witness, it would have been Lucas Haas. Narrow Margin with Gene Hackman. Again, another type of plot. I know Narrow Margin was a remake of an older 1940s or 1950s film. But this takes that sort of plot idea and mixes a bit of horror and action together, and it works really, really well. And it's such a fun movie as well. It's a fun movie. It's fast-paced. It's only 84 minutes long, and it drives along at a quick pace. It's a very good film. I'm not 100% sure if this has a Blu-ray release. It very well will from Kino or Shout Factory. It's definitely not had one in the UK, but then it is a 20th Century Fox release. So we're probably never ever going to see a Blu-ray release of this or a 4K release of this in the UK. Or anywhere possibly now that Disney own Fox. But who knows, maybe their awesome little Sony deal will allow us to see some of these older 20th Century Fox movies make it to a physical format in a better version than a DVD. And so next after that, another film that I found that I really enjoyed is, again, another film that kind of no one ever talks about, and the cast in this is insane. And it's from a director who is one of my favourite directors, and one of like the best action directors of the 1960s and 1970s. He made The Dirty Dozen, which is my all-time favourite World War II movie. But he also did this. His name is Robert Aldrich. And he directed Emperor of the North. This film is very good. This is a massively underrated film from the 1970s. 1970... What year was it? 1973. This one. It has Lee Marvin, Ernest Borgnine, and Keith Carradine in it. And it's a film set around about the Depression era in America, about what they call I guess you could say a hobo, but he was like a train hopper. He would travel the country on trains, like illegally, and he takes a younger train sort of nomad type of person under his wing, played by Keith Carradine, and shows him how to travel illegally on the trains. But there is one character in it called Stack, who is played by Ernest Borgnine. Ernest Borgnine's character does not like people riding the train for free and will do anything he can to get them off, even if that means resorting to violence. And the film basically plays out as a cat and mouse chase between Lee Marvin's character, Number One, and Stack, played by Ernest Borgnine. And it's very tense. It's very, very well acted. And it's quite violent in parts. But it's sort of like an action film and an allegorical drama. Like set in a specific period of time in American history. It's very, very good. Let me read the back for you. Set in America during the Great Depression, Emperor of the North is the story of a violent battle of wills between sadistic train guard Shaq. Sorry, I said Stack, but it's Shaq. Who has vowed no vagrant will ride his train and survive, and a single-minded drifter played by Lee Marvin called A Number One, who is determined to make lie of the boast. Bound together by their mutual loathing, Shaq and Number One hurtle together across America aboard the steam train, locked in a dangerous game of cat and mouse as each seeks to secure their position in the local legend by destroying the other. At once a classic action thriller starring two of genre's greatest stars and an allegorical. There we go, I said it. Allegorical drama entrenched in a specific period of American history. Emperor of the North is a truly unforgettable film from legendary director Robert Aldrich. So yeah, Emperor of the North is a great movie, and again, it's one that's really underrated, and I think more people need to check this film out. I do know that this does have a Blu-ray release. I don't know if it's a 4K, and I think it was Shout Factory that put this out in America. I don't know if it was Kino Law, but I'm not 100% sure. But again, unfortunately, the UK gets fucking screwed over every time when it comes to physical formats for films, and I don't think this has had a Blu-ray in this country because I have never seen it. This was released by Optimum Releasing, who I think is now owned by Studio Canal. I think so. And I'd love to see Studio Canal put this out, but I don't know if they can because, again, shock horror is a 20th Century Fox release. So this is now owned by Disney, which means we'll never see it ever. I did have another one which I grabbed, but it's been a long time since I watched it, and I can't really remember a lot about it, apart from I quite enjoyed it. And it's the movie The Hot Rock, starring Robert Redford and George Segal. Directed by Peter Yates of Bullet fame and Kroll fame. Like I said, I remember really enjoying this, but I can't really remember a lot about it, so I can't really talk about it. But again, this is a film we probably will never see in the UK on Blu-ray because it, again, is a 20th Century Fox release. I know this does have a release on Blu-ray somewhere, maybe America, but over here in the UK, we don't have a Blu-ray release of that. There was a few more that I was trying to find. One of them is the film Prime Cut, which stars Lee Marvin and Gene Hackman, as well as Sissy Spacek, which is a fantastic movie. I have that somewhere. I think it might be under my TV, or it might be in one of the bags under my bed. I'm not 100% sure. Deliverance, everyone talks about Deliverance, so I'm not going to be chatting much about that one. I wanted to make this a longer video, but obviously I couldn't really find a lot of 70s movies that most people don't really talk about. These four were essentially the ones that I could find while I was doing my my look through. I mean, there are some horror films as well, but it's mostly the Hammer type of stuff that was from the 70s. I was going to talk. Well, originally I was going to do a video about this film, which is The Day the World Ended, which I talked about in the last video when I talked about Panic in Year Zero, and when I did the podcast and I talked about Roger Corman movies and how this was a really cool little film and it was remade in the year 2889. So I was going to do a video about this, but I might do that in another video. Like, I might make another video about that, going over some of my favourite Roger Corman films, like I did in the podcast. But yeah, so I just thought I'd go through and find a couple of underrated and little seen or somewhat forgotten 70s thrillers or 70s, just fun 70s movies. There was one called Scorpio as well with Burt Lancaster, which was directed by Michael Winner as well, and it was Burt Lancaster and Alain Delon, which is a really good like espionage film. Again, the Eiger Sanction with Clint Eastwood, another sort of dip, I guess, for Eastwood. It's not up there as one of his big movies, but it is a really fun, sort of gripping action thriller from the 70s. What else? Yeah, so I can't really think of any more to do. But if you enjoy this video, there's a couple of recommendations there. If you enjoy this video, give us a like, give us a subscribe. I do live streams now. I'm not going to do a live stream yet because I've still got a problem with my eye. And it's doing my head in. So it's difficult to look at the iPad than the smaller screen on my phone because it's a little bit further away from me. But as usual, I have been Pedro. This is Pedro's Movie Cavern, and I'm going to give you a salute. I'm going to throw up the peace sign, and I'm going to tell you that I am out. Cheers, guys.